I've been a mechanic all my life, 58 years on this earth, 40 spent with grease under my fingernails. Cars don't lie. If something's wrong, you'll find signs, strange noises, leaks, odd smells. The trick is knowing how to read them. People aren't as simple, especially Carol, my wife of 34 years. Lately, she'd been working late, more often. The downtown branch is understaffed, she'd say, and I believed her because after 3 decades, trust becomes automatic. It was Tuesday when I found it. While fixing her squealing brakes, I spotted something tucked beneath the passenger seat, a folded paper map of Mill Field. Who even uses paper maps anymore? I unfolded it and saw 3 locations circled in red: Parkview Hotel downtown, Riverside Park, and an address on Maple Street I didn't recognize. None related to her bank job. That night, I casually asked, "Been to the Parkview Hotel recently?" "For work?" "No, why would I?" she replied without looking up from her book. That's when the first crack appeared in our marriage. Not from what she said, but how easily the lie came out. The next day, I entered the Maple Street address into my GPS. It showed an apartment complex called Lakeside Views. Carol had never mentioned this place, not once. Something cold settled in my gut, that feeling when I find a part in an engine that doesn't belong there, a connection that shouldn't exist. I decided to uncover what she was hiding, not because I wanted to, but because after 34 years I deserved the truth, even if it broke us. Thursday evening, Carol texted that she'd be late again. "Budget meeting, don't wait up." My response was simple: okay. But what I did next was anything but. I parked my truck a block from Lakeside Views at 7 p.m. The complex wasn't fancy, just a 3-story building with balconies overlooking a small artificial pond they had the nerve to call a lake. I slumped in my seat, feeling ridiculous. Was this what my life had become? Spying on my own wife like some desperate private investigator? 20 minutes later, Carol's Toyota pulled into the lot. My chest tightened as I watched her step out, checking her reflection in the window. She was wearing a blue dress I hadn't seen before. She never dressed like that for me anymore. She walked to the building entrance where a man was waiting, late 40s, tall, wearing a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. They didn't kiss or touch, but something in their body language, the way they angled toward each other, the easy familiarity, told me everything I needed to know. They disappeared inside together. Apartment 3B, according to the mailbox labels I'd checked earlier that day. I should have confronted them right then, should have stormed up there and caught them red-handed. But 34 years of marriage made me hesitate. What if there was an explanation? What if I was misreading everything? So I waited, stomach churning, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I'd give her the benefit of the doubt. One last time. 2 hours passed. The sun disappeared, leaving me sitting in darkness. Every minute felt like sandpaper against my skin. My phone showed 9:23 p.m. when they emerged together. Carol was laughing at something he said, her hand briefly touching his arm. That casual touch stabbed through me like a hot knife. I sank lower in my seat as they walked to their cars. She kissed him then. Not a friendly peck, but the kind of kiss that belonged to lovers. My vision blurred. 34 years reduced to this moment of betrayal. I followed her home, keeping 3 cars between us. She never noticed. When she pulled into our driveway, I drove past and circled the block twice, trying to calm down. By the time I parked, she was in the shower. "How was your meeting?" I asked, when she emerged in her bathrobe, hair wet. "Exhausting. Thompson kept arguing about every line item." She sighed dramatically. "I'm beat." I nodded, my face a mask. "You smell nice?" The scent wasn't her usual perfume. "New shower gel," she said too quickly, then changed the subject. "How was your day?" "Educational," I replied, the word catching in my throat. "Very educational." That night, lying beside her, I felt miles away. Her betrayal wasn't just physical. It was the systematic dismantling of our history together. Every lie was a sledgehammer to the foundation we'd built. I spent the weekend in a fog. Carol maintained her routine: grocery shopping Saturday morning, book club in the afternoon. I wondered how many of those book clubs had been lies, too. On Sunday, I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront her with just suspicions. I needed proof that was impossible to deny. Monday morning, after Carol left for work, I drove to my shop but didn't go inside. Instead, I called my assistant manager. "Mike, something's come up. Can you handle things today?" "Sure thing, boss. Everything okay?" "No," I said honestly, "but it will be." I drove to an electronics store and purchased a small GPS tracker. Nothing fancy, just something I could hide in her car to track her movements. Was it legal? Probably not. Did I care? Not anymore. That afternoon, I installed it under her rear bumper. The app showed a pulsing blue dot. Carol at the bank. Technology making visible what trust could not. I also bought a decent digital camera with a zoom lens. For 34 years, I'd fixed cars with my hands. Now I was using them to dismantle my marriage piece by piece. I felt sick doing it. But each time I wavered, I remembered her kissing him, laughing with him, while feeding me lies about budget meetings. My stomach clenched at the memory. This wasn't just about catching her. This was about reclaiming my dignity, piece by painful piece. If our marriage was going to end, it would be on my terms, with the truth laid bare between us. Tuesday and Wednesday passed without incident. Carol's GPS showed her at work, then home. Maybe they were being careful. Maybe I'd imagined it all. But Thursday afternoon, the blue dot moved to lakeside views again. My heart raced as I grabbed my camera and drove there. This time I positioned myself on the second floor of a parking garage across the street. Perfect vantage point of the entrance, and most of the windows facing this direction. I felt like a hunter, waiting for prey, though the comparison made my stomach turn. At 5:47 p.m., Carol arrived. This time she brought groceries, a small bag from Whole Foods, playing house. The domesticity of it turned my stomach sour. She met him at the door. I raised my camera and caught the moment in pixel-perfect clarity, her smile, his hand on the small of her back, their casual intimacy. I took a dozen photos, each one a nail in the coffin of our marriage. What hurt most wasn't that she'd found someone else. It was that she still came home to me, still slept beside me, still said, "I love you," before bed. How many nights had I lain beside a stranger? Over the next 2 hours, I documented their evening through the unshuttered windows, cooking together, eating dinner, laughing over wine, all the things we used to do, all the things I thought were ours alone. When they moved to the bedroom and closed the blinds, I lowered my camera, a strange calm settling over me. The pain had burned so hot it cauterized itself, leaving only cold determination. I didn't need to see more. I had what I needed. What I didn't have yet was my next move. Friday morning, I printed the photos at a shop across town. 38 images that read like a visual novel of betrayal. I studied the man's face, handsome in a conventional way. Younger than me, maybe mid-40s. The kind of man who worked in an office, not a garage. I did some digging. His name was Robert Daniels, financial advisor at Meridian Bank, the same bank where Carol worked. Of course. I found his LinkedIn, his Facebook, even his damn tennis club membership. He was divorced, lived alone, drove a Lexus. Saturday, Carol said she needed to run some errands. The GPS showed her at Parkview Hotel, another rendezvous point. I didn't follow this time. I'd seen enough. Instead, I sat at our kitchen table, compiling bank statements, credit card bills. I needed to understand the full scope of her deception. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Over the past 8 months, there were hotel charges, restaurant bills in places we'd never been together, even a weekend trip to a vineyard I'd never heard of. She'd booked it while I was at an auto parts convention in Detroit. Then I found something else. A separate checking account I never knew existed opened 6 months ago. Into it went $500 from every one of her paychecks. Her escape fund. She wasn't just having an affair, she was planning her exit. The pieces came together with mechanical precision. Their affair had started last summer. The Meridian Bank holiday party, probably. They'd grown bolder as time passed, and now she was preparing to leave me. I laughed bitterly. After decades fixing broken-down cars, I couldn't fix my broken-down marriage. But I could control how it ended. Sunday night, Carol said she had an early meeting Monday and went to bed early. I sat in our living room, listening to her breathing change from wakefulness to sleep, the sound I'd fallen asleep to for 34 years. I began organizing my evidence, photos, bank statements, GPS logs, and the map that started it all. The red circles almost glowed under the lamplight, accusatory beacons of betrayal. I placed everything in a large manila envelope. Then I called my lawyer, Howard. We'd been friends since high school. "John, it's 11 p.m. Everything all right?" he answered groggily. "I need to see you first thing tomorrow. It's about Carol." A pause. "Is she okay?" "No," I said. "Neither am I. I'll explain tomorrow." Howard met me at his office at 7 a.m., coffee already brewing. I slid the envelope across his desk without a word. He looked through everything methodically, his expression darkening. "Jesus, John, I'm sorry." "I need options," I said flatly. "Well, Connecticut's a no-fault state, but this evidence gives you leverage in settlement negotiations." He leaned back in his chair. "What do you want, John?" What did I want? Revenge? Justice? The last 8 months of my life back? "I want her to feel what I'm feeling," I admitted. "I want her to understand what she's destroyed." Howard sighed. "Revenge won't heal you, John." "Maybe not," I conceded, "but neither will letting her walk away thinking she got away with it." That afternoon I formulated my plan. I would confront Carol, but not in anger or violence. I would dismantle her world with the same methodical precision she'd used to destroy mine. Tuesday evening, I texted Carol, "Coming home early. Need to talk." Her response was immediate. "Everything okay?" I didn't answer. Let her worry. I laid everything out on our dining room table, the map first, then photos arranged chronologically, then financial records. A meticulous display of deceit. I placed 2 glasses and a bottle of her favorite wine beside them. Then I waited. At 6:30 p.m., I heard her key in the lock. "John?" "In the dining room," I called, my voice surprisingly steady. She appeared in the doorway, her face shifting from concern to confusion as she saw the tableau. Then, as recognition dawned, all color drained from her face. "Sit down, Carol." She didn't move. "John, I can explain." "I've heard enough explanations." I poured wine into both glasses. "Now it's time for truth." She sank into a chair, eyes fixed on the photos. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." I pushed a wine glass toward her. 8 months of lies. 34 years of marriage, and you couldn't even give me the courtesy of the truth. Her fingers trembled as she took the glass. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Nothing just happens, Carol. Cars don't just break down. There are always signs, always causes. I tapped the photo of them at Lakeside Views. This was a choice. Many choices, actually. Daily, deliberate choices to lie to me. Her eyes flicked to the financial records. "You went through everything." "Of course I did. I'm thorough. You know that about me." I smiled without warmth. "I particularly enjoyed discovering your exit strategy, the separate account. Very prudent." She flinched. "I never meant to hurt you." "And yet," I said, raising my glass in mock toast, "here we are." Carol's composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes. Whether from guilt or simply being caught, I couldn't tell any more. "We grew apart, John," she whispered. "You were always at the shop, and I was—" "Lonely?" I finished for her. We were both lonely, Carol. The difference is I didn't betray you. She flinched. Robert and I connected. He listened. He made me feel... Don't, I cut her off. Don't tell me how he made you feel. I don't need those details. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. 3 decades of shared history seemed to compress into this single, awful moment. I want a divorce, she finally said, her voice firmer now. I laughed. I'm way ahead of you. I slid Howard's business card across the table. My lawyer expects your call, but there are conditions. Her eyes narrowed. What conditions? The house is mine. I built that extension with my own hands. The shop is mine. You never showed interest anyway. Your retirement accounts are yours. Mine are mine. Clean break. That's actually fair, she said, surprised. I'm not interested in punishing you financially, Carol. I just want you gone. Her face paled. What? Immediately? Robert has a nice place at Lakeside Views. I'm sure he'll accommodate you. I gestured to the photos. You seemed quite at home there already. She stared at me, searching for the anger she expected. But I wasn't angry anymore, just hollow. I am sorry, John, for what it's worth. It's worth exactly nothing, I replied calmly. Oh, and I've frozen our joint accounts. Your secret fund should tide you over until the divorce is finalized. Her eyes widened slightly. I'd outmaneuvered her, and we both knew it. One more thing, I said, pulling out my phone. I dialed a number and put it on speaker. Hello? Answered a man's voice. Robert? Mr. Daniels, this is John Wilson, Carol's husband. Silence stretched for 3 long seconds. I don't... Save it, I interrupted. Carol is here with me. We're looking at quite a collection of photos of you two together. Carol lunged for the phone, but I pulled it away. John, don't. You should know, I continued calmly, that adultery between bank employees violates Meridian's ethics policy, especially when one party is a senior loan officer and the other is a financial advisor handling overlapping clients. That's not, Robert started. I've already emailed your HR department, included some particularly cozy photos from your little dinner parties at Lakeside Views. I imagine they'll have questions tomorrow. Carol's face drained of color. You did what? John, that could cost us both our jobs. I ended the call and looked at her steadily. Us? There is no us anymore, and yes, it might cost you your jobs. Actions have consequences, Carol. She stood shakily. I need to call him. By all means, but do it elsewhere. I've arranged for a hotel room for you tonight. I slid a key card across the table. Parkview Hotel. I thought you might appreciate the irony. Her anger finally flared. You're enjoying this, aren't you? No, I said truthfully. I'm not enjoying any of this, but I won't be the only one walking away wounded. She gathered her purse, hands trembling. I'll get some things? I've packed a bag for you. It's by the door. I gestured to the manila envelope. And you can take these. I have copies. She paused at the doorway. For what it's worth, I did love you, for most of our marriage. Just not enough, I replied. Not at the end. After Carol left, I sat alone in our home, surrounded by the artifacts of our life together. Wedding photos, vacation souvenirs, the grandfather clock we'd restored together, 34 years of accumulated history suddenly rendered hollow. The satisfaction I'd expected from my confrontation never materialized. Instead, a vast emptiness spread through me, as if I'd removed a rusted, painful part, but hadn't yet replaced it with anything new. Morning came after a sleepless night. I called Mike to say I'd be at the shop late. Then I contacted a locksmith to change the locks. By noon, our home was secured against the woman who'd shared it with me for 3 decades. My phone buzzed constantly. Carol, Robert, even Meridian Bank's HR department. I ignored them all, let the consequences unfold without my involvement. At 2 p.m., Howard called. Carol's attorney reached out. They're accepting your terms? All of them? Yes, I think they realize you have the upper hand. He paused. She wants to meet to discuss the logistics of separating your possessions. No meetings, I said firmly. She can submit a list of what she wants. I'll approve or deny each item. John, Howard's voice softened, is that really necessary? Perhaps it wasn't. Perhaps I was being petty. But pettiness felt like the only power I had left. It's how I want to proceed, I insisted. That evening I wandered through the house, touching the objects we'd collected together, deciding what I wanted to keep and what held too many memories, sorting through the wreckage of us. A week passed. Carol requested her clothes, jewelry, and family heirlooms. I agreed without argument. Her brother came to collect them while I was at work, a small mercy for us both. At the shop, I immersed myself in engines, their honest, fixable problems, a comforting contrast to my shattered marriage. My mechanics noticed my silence but respected it, offering support through extra effort rather than unwanted conversations. Word spread, as it does in small towns. Customers expressed awkward sympathies. Some brought food. Others made a point of scheduling maintenance they'd been putting off, ensuring the shop stayed busy. After 2 weeks, Mike cornered me in the office. "Boss, we're worried about you. You're here from open to close, 7 days straight." "Work helps," I said simply. "Maybe," he replied, "but it ain't living." That night, I received an email from Carol's lawyer. She and Robert had both been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. She was suing for wrongful termination based on private conduct. The lawyer wanted to know if I would testify about my vindictive actions. I laughed bitterly. After betraying me, she wanted my help? I forwarded the email to Howard with a 2-word response: absolutely not. The next day I learned through town gossip that Robert had distanced himself from Carol to save his own career. Her great love had abandoned her when things got difficult. There was poetry in that, though it brought me no joy. That weekend I forced myself to clean out Carol's remaining belongings from our bedroom. Each item unearthed fresh pain, but I needed to reclaim the space as my own. 1 month after confronting Carol, I signed the divorce papers in Howard's office. No contested assets, no prolonged legal battles, just a clean, clinical severing of ties. "It's done," Howard said, collecting the documents. "You'll be officially divorced in 90 days. I nodded, feeling strangely lighter. "Thank you for everything." "What will you do now?" he asked. A question I'd been avoiding. "Keep fixing cars. Beyond that, I don't know yet." That weekend, I drove to the coast, a trip Carol and I had planned for our upcoming anniversary. Standing alone on the windswept beach, I realized I was mourning not just my marriage, but the future I'd thought we'd share: retirement, grandchildren, growing old together. Yet amid the grief, I felt something else stirring: freedom, possibility. The chance to rediscover who John Wilson was outside of Carol's husband. I threw the red-marked map into the ocean, watching as the waves claimed it. Let the sea have that chapter of my life. Back home, I rearranged the furniture, painted the bedroom a color Carol had always vetoed. Small steps toward reclaiming my space, my identity. Mike was right. Working wasn't living, and despite everything, I still wanted to live.